The last thing the Pittsburgh Steelers should be doing right now is making harsh decisions on what they should do at quarterback in week 15 against the Carolina Panthers. What's going on, everybody? I'm Noah Strackbine. Thank you for jumping on to Steelers to Go, your daily to-go cup of Pittsburgh Steelers news and analysis. Find us on youtube.com/all Steelers talk or subscribe to us anywhere you get your podcasts. And today, as much as people don't want to hear it and people don't want to agree with me, and I respect that disagreement, the Steelers should not be making harsh decisions and jumping the gun and making a move to say Mitch Trubisky is no longer the number 2 and Mason Rudolph will start against the Carolina Panthers in week 15. As of right now, you have to look at the situation and believe that Kenny Pickett is not going to play football in Carolina. This is his second concussion of the season. The first one, he was the fastest person to recover from concussion protocol in the NFL this year. Not promising. Didn't look good for the Steelers at the time. The fact that he went back into the game for a series before being taken out and declared in concussion protocol against the Baltimore Ravens was not a good sign for Pittsburgh once again. There's definitely going to be questions. I wouldn't be surprised if the NFL investigation starts at some point this week, and I would not by any means be surprised if they got hit with a fine from what that investigation showed. So you have to imagine that Kenny isn't going to play. So who plays quarterback? Do you stick with Mitch Trubisky, who against the Baltimore Ravens, I guess was half of the reason that they lost? He threw 30 times off the bench for 276 yards, 1 touchdown, 3 interceptions, all 3 of them coming within the 20-yard line of a touchdown. I guess one of them was a deep ball, still caught at the 1-yard line by a Baltimore Ravens defender. It was about as poor of a showing as you could have asked for. It was the last thing the Pittsburgh Steelers needed, and I'm not going to be the guy that says Mitch lost them the game. I mean, look, the Steelers defense, yeah, they only gave up 16 points, but they gave up 16 points to Anthony Brown and Tyler Huntley. That's not an impressive 16 points. They allowed J.K. Dobbins to do anything and everything he wanted to do, and with that final drive, they couldn't stop a fly running through that offensive line. And truthfully, it was Patrick Ricard who just pretty much owned the Steelers defense. And I'm going to put a large chunk of the blame on them for why the Steelers lost that game. I'm not going to hold back and say that Mitch went out there and lost the game. Now, I will say that if this was a 50-50 split, yeah, Mitch was the other half, and those 3 turnovers in the red zone were about as bad as it gets. And when it comes to the future of Mitch Trubisky, yeah, I think that game solidified that he will not be in Pittsburgh next season. And I don't know where he'll be, but I find it very hard to believe that he's going to be a quality backup somewhere in 2023. But he's going to get an opportunity in week 15, and I feel very strongly about that. This is how I see the week shaping out. I look at it like it will be Mitch who gets a majority of the first team reps. I think Mason Rudolph's going to get some. I think they're going to give him some opportunity, but not a realistic one, because that's what they've done with Mason his entire career. Think about it. Think about all summer long. We came into training camp and the thought was, okay, at some point, Mason Rudolph will get an opportunity to prove himself as the starting quarterback. We came into the season. Mason Rudolph signed a 1-year contract extension the year prior with the belief that once Ben is gone, Mason will have an opportunity to be the guy. Well, the Steelers decided Mason isn't getting any opportunity to be the guy. In fact, we are going to make it so fake that Mason has an opportunity to be the guy that we're actually going to yank him from the number 2 spot before we're halfway through training camp so that it looked like we gave him a chance, but really we didn't give him any chance. That's been the Pittsburgh Steelers motto with Mason Rudolph. I've come on here time and time again, and I think everybody else has realized at this point too that the disrespect there is insane. And I'm not saying that Mason Rudolph is a starting quality quarterback in the NFL because I don't believe that he is, but I do believe that he was worthy of a chance. I do believe that he earned the respect enough to get a chance. And I think that the Pittsburgh Steelers gave him no respect back and decided he wasn't even worthy of a real chance, not even one slight opportunity. So, what makes you think that's going to change this week? What makes you think that just because Mitch Trubisky threw 3 interceptions, that the Steelers are suddenly going to go, yeah, well, Mason Rudolph might have an opportunity this week? It's not going to happen. As much as it should happen, as much as Mason Rudolph should get a real chance to at least compete to start this week, the Steelers are going to look at it and say the season is still alive somehow. They have an opportunity to go to Carolina and win. They're not going to mess around with a quarterback competition for a backup job for a 1-week start while Kenny Pickett is in concussion protocol, when really in their heads, they're probably thinking Kenny should be out there starting, but they don't want to set off any more red flags with the NFL. So they'll just send Mitch out there. They'll prepare all week long with Mitch. They'll make the excuse, oh, well, we don't want to stir any controversy. We don't want to turn attention away from preparing. We're going to focus the offense on Najee. We're not going to have Mitch do too much. And then they're going to go out there and Mitch is going to throw the ball 30 times. And you're going to question what is going on in Pittsburgh. Because that's what we are in. That's the cycle that the Pittsburgh Steelers have pushed upon us for the last 365 days. What is going on with the Pittsburgh Steelers? So how do I see the quarterback shaking out this week? I see it being Mitch Trubisky. And I'll tell you this. I don't feel poorly about that decision. I don't think I'm very upset about that decision. I think that decision makes a lot of sense. I think that decision makes a lot of sense because George Pickens and Deontay Johnson and Pat Freiermuth have already played games with this guy. The offensive line has already played games with this guy. Najee Harris already played games with this guy. He's got the experience. He's got the camaraderie with the group, and he carries more Kenny Pickett than Mason Rudolph does, in the sense of they're going to go out there. They're not going to ask him to do too much, or at least they're going to say they're not going to ask him to do too much. And in tight situations, they're going to tell him to tuck the ball and run. Mason Rudolph can't do that, unfortunately. And Mitch Trubisky has that upper hand. And they'll take advantage of that. And they'll look at the situation and say, okay, Mitch is just going to run the same offense in a very, very conservative fashion. And when needed, he'll run the football. And that just, it does. It makes sense. You know, you've been saying that from the jump. That was the argument for Kenny Pickett to be the backup, was he's more of Mitch Trubisky than Mason Rudolph is. You don't want to change the offense once Mitch gets out of there for Mason Rudolph. And that's the same thing here, is you don't want to change the offense too much for Mason Rudolph in 1 week. Instead, you just plug Mitch in, you run the same offense, and you just hope that he could do enough to win. Will he? I don't know. I think that this game relies heavily on Najee Harris, heavily on Pat Freiermuth, and that's a major question mark right now because Pat was seen in the locker room after the game with a boot on his left leg, left ankle-ish foot area, being tended to by team doctor Tom Bradley. That's not a healthy sign. You got to hope that Deontay Johnson and George Pickens come up with some big plays, but really you have to hope that the defense can hold strong, because if they don't bounce back and find some way to keep a team under 14 points, because coming into the season, the standard was 20 points across the board. In the NFL, the rule of thumb is if you could hold a team to 20 points, you win the football game. 19 points is all you got to do. If a team scores 19 points, you should find a way to beat them. This year, it's if a team scores 13 points, you should find a way to beat them. And 13 points is tough. Tough. If you can't hold a team to 13 points with Anthony Brown Jr., who shout out to the guy wearing his jersey walking into the stadium yesterday, because that was the first Ravens jersey I saw, and I had no idea who that guy was. He wasn't on the flip card. I looked for him when I got into the stadium. He wasn't on the flip card. No idea who Anthony Brown Jr. was, but somebody was rocking his jersey. And he did enough to walk in there, beat Tyler Huntley, and win a game. If the defense can't do that for those two guys, it's very tough to imagine they're going to do it against Sam Darnold. But they're going to have to, because that's the situation the Steelers are in. This is going to come down to a defensive hold. Najee Harris doing what Najee Harris does best, and that's just trucking ahead for 4 yards a carry. And Mitch Trubisky playing very, very conservative football. But it's going to be Mitch Trubisky, as much as people don't want to see that. And I'm not the one that's coming up with these numbers. I was watching, I believe it was the Final Word last night, and I think it was 71% of Steelers fans voted that Mason Rudolph should be the starting quarterback next week. There is no love for Mitch Trubisky. Once upon a time, there was no love for Mason Rudolph. And once upon a time, there was no love for Kenny Pickett. But right now, the cycle and the train is pointing towards Rudolph, and people love Rudolph. But he's not going to start. It's going to be Mitch. That's how they're going to approach the week. Is it going to work? I don't know. Is it worth it? I think so. I think it's the right call. I don't know if it's the winning call, but I don't know if they have a winning call outside of Kenny Pickett. I guess we'll find out on Sunday.